Well, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Our lesson for today is going to be taken from Daniel chapter 1. So if you'd like to look in your Bibles, that will be the chapter we'll be reading together today. I'm going to start by reading a few verses at the beginning of this chapter. In the third year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. The Lord gave to Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand, along with some of the vessels of his house of God. And he brought them to the land of Shinar, the house of his God, and he brought the vessels into the treasury of his God. Then the king ordered Ashpenaz, the chief of his officials, to bring in some of the sons of Israel, including some of the royal family of the nobles, youths in whom was no defect, who were good-looking, showing intelligence in every branch of wisdom, endowed with understanding and discerning knowledge, and who had an ability for serving in the king's court. And he ordered him to teach them the literature and language of the Chaldeans. The king appointed them for a daily ration from the king's choice food and from the wine which he drank, and appointed that they should be educated 3 years, at the end of which they were to enter the king's personal service. Now among them were the sons of Judah. From the sons of Judah were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Then the commander of the officials assigned new names to them. Daniel he assigned the name Belteshazzar, Hananiah, Shadrach, Mishael, Meshach, and to Azariah, Abednego. So this is the beginning of a story that we might know well from Sunday school. These fellas are someone we look at a lot of times when we're talking about our devotion to God, to rejecting idols, and to making sure that we are obedient to God in the face of outside pressure. But as we look at this chapter and we go on, I'm not sure that's entirely the whole point of what's going on here. In terms of obedience only, that's not the main message. Nor is it that youthful men who are strong in the faith can withstand temptation. There's nothing particularly inherently virtuous about being a young person that makes you more liable to follow what God asks you to do. In fact, I think if any of us can recall a rebellious time of our lives, it was probably a younger period, and we're not anticipating any rebellion in the future. I know some older folks tend to get a little bit rambunctious in their elderly years, but I would encourage you to try and avoid those if you can manage it. As we look at this also, we're not going to be talking just about the choices of the food they're eating. The next thing we're going to see is a story we might be familiar with, but it's not just about food purity either. Let's continue on with verse 8. Daniel made up his mind that he would not defile himself with the king's choice food or with the wine which he drank. So he sought permission from the commander of the officials that he might not defile himself. Now God granted Daniel favor and compassion in the sight of the commander of the officials. And the commander of the officials said to Daniel, I'm afraid of my lord the king, for why should he see your faces looking more haggard than the youths who are your own age? Then he would make me forfeit my head to the king. But Daniel said to the overseer, whom the commander of the officials had appointed over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, please test your servants for 10 days. Let us be given some vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then let our appearance be observed in your presence, and the appearance of the youths who are eating the king's choice food, and deal with your servants according to what you see. So we're looking here at a passage where Daniel is standing up for what he believes in. Daniel is an old person who, even though trouble might come to him and to the people around him, he's going to stand up and defy authority in the name of doing what is right. Is that the message of this chapter? I'm not entirely sure that's the main point. We're also seeing that Daniel is very particular about the law. Food purity is very important to Jewish people, and these pagan foods that are being brought in front of them couldn't be clean, let alone healthy. And eating the food from the king's table where he has lavish meals all the time, which are made of who knows what, would not be good for some young Jewish men. So is it about the food purity of the law? I'm not entirely sure that's the point either. So let's go ahead and look at this a little bit further. Verse 14, so he listened to them in this matter and tested them for 10 days. At the end of the 10 days, their appearance seemed better, and they were fatter than all the youths who had been eating the king's choice food. So the overseer continued to withhold their choice food and the wine they were to drink, and kept giving them vegetables. As for these 4 youths, God gave them knowledge and intelligence in every branch of literature and wisdom, and Daniel even understood all kinds of visions and dreams. So is the point of this chapter that you need to deal shrewdly with non-believers? You need to be able to be clever in the way that you handle people, and you need to have a special kind of way of maneuvering around society to do what is right? I'm not entirely sure that's the main point. Is the point that if you talk your way into certain situations, that God will favor you? If you do the right thing, God will give you extra blessings over people. If you eat vegetables, he'll somehow make you fatter than people eating good food. I'm not entirely sure that's the point either. Let's go ahead with verse 18. Then at the end of the days, which the king had specified for presenting them, the commander of the officials presented them before Nebuchadnezzar. The king talked with them, and out of them all not one was found like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So they entered the king's personal service. As for every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king consulted them, he found them to be 10 times better than all the magicians and conjurers who were in the realm. And Daniel continued until the first year of Cyrus the king. Now, I think the point of what we're looking at here is that the person that you are before you get put into the situation is much more important than the person you are trying to be when the situation happens to you. Now, remember who Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are before this story starts. And who are they with? A bunch of other Jewish men who were captives from this new territory that just got taken over by the king. All of those men who failed this test, who went below the standards, were their countrymen. They were their kinsmen. These were the same guys who came from the same background. They were likely young noblemen, just like these guys were. They were of the kind of background and breeding and education that they would have been useful as officers in the king's court. That's why they were selected to begin with, right? We saw that at the very beginning of the chapter. So the situation that Daniel was coming from and his companions was the same as all those men who did not meet the king's standards. The difference was Daniel and Hananiah and Mishael and Azariah's character. Who they were before that situation was imposed on them. The integrity of those young men is what carried them through. They didn't have to try and figure out, what are my morals? What's the right thing to do? How should I act? How should I deal with people? How should I talk to individuals who are opposed to me and trying to drag me down to a type of behavior I know is not acceptable to the Lord? What should be my part in this? They didn't have to, because they were the kind of people who had consistently been following God all their lives, and so when an unexpected, unwelcome circumstance came to them, they continued to be that kind of person. So the main point of this chapter, the lesson and the takeaway for us, is that we have to be applying ourselves to the day-to-day practice of obedience to God, rather than the moment-to-moment reaction to opportunities for disobedience. And that is the definition of discipline. If what we are trying to do is catch up to the moment, do the right thing in that situation, we will never be as ready as we would be if we did the right thing step by step along the path. You can think about this in terms of an athlete, right? If you throw me into a game of pickup basketball, I'm going to drop the ball. I'm not going to make any of the shots into the hoop. I'm going to be out of breath. And the first time somebody blocks me, I'm going to fall over like they fouled me, because I'm not in shape to play basketball. But if I start going down to the park, and I start practicing with the guys down there, I'm not going to be in at NBA level, but I might be able to hold my own after a couple of weeks. And the point of what I'm trying to say is, we have a lot of easier thing to train for, a lot less physically grueling at least. If we are continually practicing the discipline of having a character that is modeled on God's own character, then no matter who challenges us, we'll be ready to hold our own and to do the right thing. That's the lesson for this evening, and I realize that some of these lessons almost seem obvious. Sometimes we open the Bible and the Bible tells you, be a good person. But the real lesson is not about just doing good people things, but modeling your very self after the ultimate example of a good man, Jesus Christ. And if you haven't taken the first step to do that, by being baptized and joining his church, we'd offer that opportunity in just a moment as we stand.